How you doing today?
Good. I had a lot of sessions, so
Oh, you got a lot of sessions. Good deal. That's
thank
that's
you.
good to hear. I'm glad to hear that. You deserve it. You earned it. You're earning it. You're doing your part. Okay, let me get the show rolling. So we can go. If we need to go longer, we can go longer. We got another show 2 hours after this one started, so we're okay. Just let it flow. Oh my God. Do I got stuff to tell you?
Yeah, it's been a week.
The most brutal. What did I say? Somebody asked me, and I said it was the longest night and highest flight. I don't know, something poetic, but it sounded better than that. But oh my God, it was freaking brutal yesterday. Brutal yesterday. But Morgan reminded me that this is good. It's a gift. You're having a conscious integration, transformation, DNA upgrade. I said, really? Well, can't they do it with more ease and grace? Okay, let's see what we got. We got 27 people in the house. We got good sound. If these shows resonate with you, please share. We could really use the assistance as we were now over our problems with YouTube, I think. And got a meeting this afternoon with Michael Van Patten on the website. We got to get the wheels rolling again. It's that time. Uh-oh, hang on. Let's see. I'm going to share this to a few groups, affiliated groups. Did you want me to share it to your page, Allison? Or you already got it?
You can do that?
Yeah, I can do it. Unless you have restrictions on your page.
It'll go on my timeline, but I think I have to prove it.
That's fine. Just it's tagged anyway, so it'll come up on your approvals. So we got 42 people here. Thank you everybody for coming in. Thank you for your continued love and support and contributions. You know, it's we had one president elected on very small contributions. Ron Paul ran a hell of a campaign on small contributions, and they're not small. You know, the energy of them, it doesn't matter how many zeros are behind it, but it all helps, believe me. So we get to keep going by the seat of our pants, and we appreciate that. Hello, Denise Chadwick, Dr. Joe Delaney, Cricket Holden, Zavetta Da Vinci, Michelle Good, Shanine Benrion. I can't mispronounce her name again. Sheila Sin, I'd love to have you back on. Had a great show with her. Sharon Atkinson, Shannon Corona, Sue Baxter Fitz, Isabel Mary, Shannon Christine, Karen Finstermeister from California, Nicia Rose, Ali Franklin, Katarina Suta Corva, Morgan Lee, Serpa Tuamin, Stephen Nichols, Kathy Nemitz Serrano, Demetrius, good to see you, Demetrius. Dorian, good to see you. Ann McKean, good to see you. And I think that's all we got so far. They're coming in too fast. 56 in the house. I was thinking about renaming this show WTF Update, the Saturday WTF Update, because yeah, these last few days have been real interesting. And Morgan and I were talking about it. It's going to be interesting to see what Allison's got to say. So how has your last few days been? The last thing I know, I got a note from you saying I'd like to do a show on what you and Dr. Joe were talking about. Mm-hmm. And I sent it over to Morgan, but then I ended up doing 2 shows that would have been the same day, canceled 2, and then totally took yesterday off. I couldn't do it. And that doesn't happen to me. You know, it doesn't happen. So here we are. What WTF is going on? WTF, what is going on out there? in the world of depth astrology, archetypes, and just the shit we don't know, you know?
Like, I feel like we're really merging planes here. And so, you know, there's a lot of deepening and then resurging resistance to the underlying feeling tones within the wounded masculine. Mm-hmm. But also for women, it's not allowing us to actually be fully in our feminine because of the masculine undertones that we hold on to. And so So this intensity is really bringing about a specific like distortion within our psyche, which is like this overly domineering and controlling aspect of the masculine structured identity, like we talked about before. And I feel like it's building up into the two eclipses, which is July 2nd and July 16th.
Holy shiitake mushrooms.
So, but the eclipses, we have to understand that it's a total solar eclipse in the house of the moon with the moon. And so this is total lunar nurturing essence, female elements that are eclipsing the archetypal king or the archetypal masculine rulership. Yeah. So this is like an undercurrent of like wiping away the slate entirely. And we're really feeling through all the energetic distortions that are still in our subconscious that belong to the polarity of the eclipse, which is the south node with Pluto and Saturn, which is the old dominating systems.
Yeah.
So all the distortions that belong to the old system still are going to be confronted. And it's not easy to do it with this masculine energy, because the masculine is more of a matrix. It's more of a grid that contains, whereas the female or the feminine is more of a womb space. And so, but we have to feel into new codes of being able to envelop the masculine and also allow him to surrender his control facade down into his true virtuous energetic signature, which is a new templating that's coming in that I'm trying to articulate the best I can as it comes in. And so new kingship, our own rulership, our own authority, then, you know, really gets put back and integrated into our domicile, but we can't actually come into this kingship, whether it's female or masculine, until we are actually able to exalt the masculine.
Yeah.
Because that's the full penetrating force that we are now confronting, which is very uncomfortable to hold in our field.
Yeah.
The matrix is not what we're used to. Like really dense energy is not what we're used to, because we've been working in the feminine for so long.
Yeah.
So now this penetration of like this container, this huge, powerful, like if you want to say universal cock, is now coming into penetrating our own force field. And it's not nurturing, but that's how we have to balance it, is like surrender deeply into it. Because that's really the only way to accept it.
That's actually, that's actually very sexy and very hot. But at the same, I don't mean that in a human way. But you're absolutely right. The way you're describing this, it's not like one side. When you first started talking about this, I thought, these two eclipses in July in the house of the moon. It sounds to me like the Dark Mother's going to come in wielding a scythe and cleaning all the bullshit out. And here we go. But at the same time, the other side's there too. So you can't have one without the other. And I can see what you're saying. As much as the power of the feminine is coming in to clean house and cut the bullshit, you've got this new masculine energy coming in that is a power, like you were talking about, I think last week and the week before. And like everything else, there's a surrender to it. And the way you put it was so eloquent. I love it.
But the power of the feminine is the masculine, because the feminine is this sultry elixir of this pink energy that we got introduced to in session or in this space, right? I was like, you're like, what's the message? And I'm like, bloop, bloop. And like, it was just like, because I need to deepen into and contemplate, right? There's so much more that like I have to feel into when I get that shit. And I'm just like, yeah. And then, so like this is the energetics of being able to hold a divine union in your field, is this pink energy resurfacing to allow the protrusion of this intense masculine.
Yeah.
And so now that I'm feeling into new codes and energetics as I shift very quickly, usually it's really, it's just the picture of the yin and yang. It's really just like, oh, I can see that, you know, these women are being very domineering, and but they need to feel into that, but I can actually feel into that with them and reassure them, you know, and introduce them into allowing space for them to feel through that, which is a new relationship aspect within my field.
Yeah.
Where last week even it was like this huge cock in my field, and I was just like, there's just so much intensity, but other people would register it as fear, right? And for me it's just like, okay, I can hold this intensity in my field, but what the fuck am I supposed to do with it? Like, how do I contain it? How do I channel it? What is it? And so now I understand it and can integrate it, but there's a really big psychological demise that actually has to go into that. And so this is really the work, you know. And it's not easy, like you said. Can't you just caress it a little bit? Like,
can you go easy? Yeah.
That's also you not having the codes of being able to caress it or allow it and feel into the crevices of it and nurture it, you know. And so, but it's not all that, because it is fucking intense to confront this shit. But
you know, I got to tell you, and this started for me. Okay, so I didn't do any yesterday. It would have been the day before. I did a show in the morning with this lady, which was fantastic. Or, you know, it was like bliss. Like even that morning, Morgan woke up with a vision. Everything was blissful. People were talking bliss. I get on the show with this lady. It ends with her higher self appearing before me while I'm on the show with her and saying, thank you, Todd. Thank you, Morgan. Thank you, Soulogy, for assisting my human self, her, to come out as a speaker, something like that. I was like, whoa, you know, it almost looked like an angel. It was all white. So I get off of that show, and then everything changed. Morgan's an antenna. So I get off the show and she says, I got to go. I'm like, all right. But she starts walking. My friend calls me on the phone, who's very connected, like y'all. And she says, first thing she says to me is, I haven't talked to her in a week or so. She says, how are you doing? I said, I'm fine. And I was to that point, although I could feel something shifting. And then she says, I've been feeling this tension for 2 days. It's building. It's not affecting me. I don't talk to a lot of people, but it's out there. I know what I'm talking about. And this lady does. So then I get off of that. I do the show with Nikki Hammond. I feel like something possessed me. Like the human is a fucking hero. You know, there is no predestination. We got this template. We've got all these templates, all these universal templates been given to us. We're in this experience, taking this dense vibration into who knows what height based on our free will. And I just went on this rant, man. And I was like, God. So I get off, and then it just went from there. So the next morning I get up, and I went for a long walk. Like a long walk. And I came back. Morgan's getting in the car. She says, I'm going to go down to the park. You want to go? And I'm like, I guess so. Spent the entire day. I spent the entire day at the park, then to the beach, then to a waterfall, then to the park again. And I'm telling you, it was an MF. I mean, I was dry heaving. I was trying to cry. I wouldn't come out. I didn't know what it was. I started having this freaky remembrance of being molested, like being in a corner, curled up in a ball. Please leave me alone. Please don't hurt me. Please don't hurt me. Please don't hurt me. Go away. I'm like, what is this, man? After all this, I've done a lot of shadow work. I'm not saying I've done as much as anyone else, but I've done a lot. And I thought, what is all this? And it was like the very last, the guts of this deep masculine wound, which affected my masculinity in terms of how I interacted with men, like alpha male, fear, aggression, that I put to bed, right? And then also affected my relationship with the feminine, which I've gone through and documented online many times over the last 3 or 4 years. And I thought I was at peace, but it made me realize all this mistrust, betrayal was a big one. Abandonment was a big one. And wanting to whip somebody's ass was a big one. And the whole time, I'm literally on my knees. Now, she shifted. She's done a boatload of shadow work. And as I understand it, those that do can go through these things quicker. She shifted in about an hour. So I had the luxury of her holding space and guiding me the whole day. But I got to tell you, I've never in my life, gone through what I went through. I can't even explain it. I felt depleted, destroyed, shattered. And I'm coming out of this blissful period, and then finally, toward the end of the day, after many hours, like I said, 12 hours, it finally wore off. And we had, she got woke up at 2, I got woke up about 3, and she was channeling for like 2 hours. And then I started seeing all these star family. And so there was an obvious evidence of elevation. So I don't know what's going on, but I really resonate with what you said about the masculine. I know it's all of what you're talking about, but it seems like there's this deep masculine wound that's being transmuted or transformed or whatever, and it is affecting everyone. But she made the point to me yesterday, this isn't you, this is collective, and it's probably going to hit the men harder in general than it's going to hit the women, because the women have been more connected, they've been less fearful, so that's what my experience was. Thank you for letting me share that. I just thought that might help some of the men out there and whoever, but anyway, I don't know how that gels with what you're talking about. It sounds pretty similar though.
Yeah, that's intense, Todd, and thank you for sharing that. That feels like such a soft space that, that's really tender. And so like that's really what we're
That's the
moving
word.
is like, yeah. And so so I think there's this, vulnerability aspect that needs to be felt into in the masculine, right? And so like even with me, in my own wound set in my masculine, there's like this oversharing and then not enough of the feeling tones of like what that actually means for me, within that vulnerability. And like yes, that's what it is for you, but it's also a very tender and vulnerable place that could be infused into your masculine. Now that you've unpacked that shit, now there can be like a feminine infusion of really, instead of like the power, but this pleasure sequence that's kind of burst through that. So a femininity within your masculine even. And like really, instead of a desensitization to femininity or luxury or, just sensuality,
Yeah. Yeah.
like the abundance codes that
Yeah.
were distorted in that sexual energy can now reappear.
Yeah.
You can feel into this new movement of space because that's, energy emotion, or energy in motion is emotion. So once, those distortions can come out, then more like what we were talking about with the pink, like turning the black into the pink is like, that's really um us really wanting to surrender and all just go back home. We all just
That's
want to
that's
go back.
that's how yeah, that's how I felt yesterday. I actually went for this walk. I actually planned my exit. I flipped off the universe. I said, man, I thought the pain and suffering were over, and I said, man, I'm done. I'm gonna go do this and I'm done. And I'm thinking to myself, are you really gonna do that? I'm like, well, I feel like I'm gonna do it. I felt like I wasn't even I felt like almost like I was out of my body. But I don't mean in a good way, you know? And it was it was the rawest I've ever felt in my life. You're right. It was tender. Even later in the night when things lightened up, Morgan made a joke or she kind of like fake yelled at me, like, pick that up, or I don't even know what it was. But I actually jumped. I had PTSD all day yesterday. And I actually jumped and I was laughing. I said, hey man, don't even raise your voice a little bit, even if you're joking, because I'm like really tender. And I was laughing about it. And the other thing that you're saying that really, really is happening, I can only speak for myself, but everything, I've come to understand and working with her that everything is in the physical is a representation of what's going on here, right? Like so this whole sacred sex, divine union part of the trip, which is really a reflection of what's happened inside of me, as I understand it. The sacred sexual part, everyone pretty much knows we both retained celibacy for a while. We got married, and then we start this journey with sacred sex. So it's nothing like where I came from, or most of us came from. And it's like we only do things when we're in alignment and when we're basically quote unquote told. Like we just know. And it's like any other time you try to force anything, it just doesn't work. It's like we're being propelled into the pure way, the right way, the non-distorted way, as a representation of the energetic, is what I'm trying to say. And what I wanted to make the point of is I actually see in my life and in my relationship what you're talking about. I can actually see the things aligning. They're not here yet. I mean, each step is, but I can see that aligning and how it's actually, parlaying into my physical experience. And it all comes down to the masculine and the feminine. I love what you said earlier, that she has to surrender to this power and vice versa. And I can actually see it happening. In those words, sensuality, alluring, oh my God, what is that? I mean, that is like, holy shift. I mean, that I can see what you're talking about and where it's headed. So, there is hope.
Yeah, because it's like, even for us women who are really powerful change agents, like doing this work, holding that power in our field and our wisdom, we also have to hold the energy of that soft, voluptuous, beautiful kindness in order for ourselves to merge before. And so like the key undertones of the sacred marriage, like, are breathtakingly soft and magnanimously powerful, but we have to be able to soften into our feminine enough to hold that huge activation and initiation of what we actually are being asked to provide here, or be of service here. And so it's like, holding a huge cock gently within our field. And by doing that, you know, we are holding the codes for, you know, Konnichio or divine union or Heros Gamos, but you can't feel into that unless you're trusting your feminine enough to be vulnerable, right? And so there's a relationship dynamic of um, being able to be dominant and being able to also be submissive, like, so being this dom and being the sub, and like
On both
really,
sides,
yeah.
and vice. I mean, on both sides, the masculine and the feminine. So
Mhm.
each one of them within their own space can take on each one of those polarities equally and openly. I think that's what you're saying. Is that right?
Yeah. And what I'm starting to understand is that that's just like a gameplay. Like, yeah. But like,
Well, it makes sense.
but so what's coming through is like these new divine templates. But so so instead of having um like our inorganic and distorted essences of childhood trauma or whenever we got imprinted, right? We're now into a new template that is calling in our prince or princess energy, which is this pure sexual intrigue, right? But it's for ourselves and for life itself. And so like all the distortions in the masculine gets to, you know, dissolve, and then there's a newness now budding, you know, within, and it's kind of calling us home. um and I think there's a relationship dynamic of being in relationship with ourselves and being in awe of ourselves,
Yeah.
you know, and that's really our authentic self,
Yeah.
being in awe of self. And we understand that, you know, reality is beyond words, but like being in awe of what we're being called to do is really um us calling us home. And so, you know, there's a lot of layers of what's not us, but what is us is this awe
Yeah.
struck energy,
Yeah.
you know, we get to embody. And
Yeah.
then it's really though the universe is in awe of us
Yes.
and what we're doing. And
I'm
so
digging
it's
that.
a mirror of like being able to hold that, you know, and that space and just being that, right? And so that's trusting a whole nother level, right? Like,
It's yeah, and you know another thing I'm seeing that it's like a seesaw. You know, I mean it's like one side goes and then the other side, and then it just. But at the human level, and I got to look at my own experience, but I got to believe that it's not unique. That we're a physical representation of what we're talking about, right? Morgan and I. So it's like, okay, so like there was like a level, and again, this is an imprint or a template that applies all the way down the road. It just keeps leveling up, maybe is the way I want to put it. But as we're getting into this, what seems to be like this home stretch, like maybe going into these eclipses, it's like he has to surrender because he had to surrender this false power, I guess. Okay, all this power he had, you know. So he has to like go to this place like where you're raw and tender and like, holy shit, vulnerable, and surrender to her wisdom, which is many things, right? So then, and I haven't gotten there, I'm just saying, so then I'm on the road as you go into this thing and you truly surrender everything from that masculine energy, then she starts to basically create this, you know, this new masculine, incredible, you know, force that, like you said at the beginning, then she has to get to a point to surrender to that. And that's kind of what I see happening. But this thing about following that feminine, which is again in me, right? Following that feminine has been like pulling thorns out of your ass. You know what I mean? Like you sat in a briar patch and you're having to pull them out one by one, or pulling teeth. It's actually taken a lot of self introspection to realize how deep all this masculine stuff went, and to really just pull off the armor. And sometimes I do it consciously, and sometimes I get hit right between the eyes, like I did yesterday. And the universe just came in and said, "Hey, it's time, pal. We're going to go ahead and clean this up." You know, I believe yesterday took me to, and I remember I was homeless on the street for 2 years when this started, and I had some rough times. But yesterday probably took me to the closest. The universe took me to the edge of my sanity, literally. Took me as far as it could take me in preparation for, you know, what came afterward. So
yeah, obviously we all know that these energies are there to resonate a certain aspect of our psyche, to dislodge that, right? And that's the only way we can become aware that it's there, is these influxing energies that are meant to specifically heighten a specific archetypal imprint, or, you know, a generational distortion. And so without these intensities, we, you know, we would go on like this. And so so yeah, and I feel like, what, in response to what you were saying, like the feminine has to be, you know, fully embodied, nourished, right? And this is why she comes first.
yeah,
Fully embodied, nourished, taken care of, prioritized for, because this is her masculine.
yeah,
Right? And so she can fully prioritize for, take care of, and nourish, full soul nourishment,
yeah,
the masculine. And so it's not, but also vice versa. Like, we have different, you know, psychologies that go into that. And so there's a deep underlayer of like being provided for, you know,
yeah,
and being taken care of, and without reason, you know. And that's really, we're getting into like the child sequences of the innocence of the surrender. And until we can see ourselves as innocent, we can't see other people as innocent. And so there's a lot of people coming to me now that, like, you know, are still identifying the sorcery of their own psyche as, other people are doing this upon me. And so there's a distortion of innocence that was lost, their own, which first needs to be taken back by holding the perpetrator accountable, right? So the victim and the perpetrator fuse together. Normally in archetype are separate forms. And so the victim and the perpetrator fuse together, and then the victim identifies with the perpetrator and does the perpetrating itself in spiritual Stockholm syndrome. And diffusing this polarity is about raging against the one that is not you. Have to see what that is, and understand what that has done. And so that is not necessarily easy to come by. Sometimes it takes a lot of like my trying to like use a language around why you should be upset at this person that's not you, because I can feel this fusion hasn't been separated. And so they're still not able to hold the people accountable that did the perpetrating. And so they're in this cycle of repeat pattern victimhood and, you know, and that's how you can actually take responsibility, though. And I feel like that's the exalted masculine that we're coming into, is that no, those people are actually responsible for what they've done.
Yeah.
Then you can see the distortion. Then you can be at a higher plane of surrender, of allowing people their own innocence, right, to be where they are.
Yeah.
And but also to be able to discern, is this my subconscious, right? Am I projecting? So is there something here for me, or is this just their shit? Like, you have to be able to check in and then see that and understand if there's a you in there, or if that has nothing to do with you. And so that's a big part of taking responsibility for your fucking work. And so I've had people come here for like astrology readings from me, and like they've done no work. They can't hear me speak. Like there's just like they don't understand. And this was just in a simple astrology reading, and it's just that they're not able to take responsibility at the level of which, you know, you're processing. Even it's like, well, I'm not conscious, or I don't have an awareness of self, because myself is, and my power was lost in so many distorted places that I think I'm all these other people too, or like my is still outside of myself, and I haven't recollected all my data yet, and so that's distorted. And like there's no clear boundary and no clear safe place. Like you belong to the world, and the world belongs to you. And so I'm not sure why that rambling wanted to come.
Well,
maybe something in it for someone.
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
What goes into shadow work, as far as like really self-awareness for your projections always.
Yeah.
Which, yeah,
and that's right. You know, there was some projecting. You know, yesterday was the day of the catharsis thing for me. She was already through it. There was a little bit of projecting, not much. There was a little bit of projecting, as is normal, the day before. But it really, early on, when we met up at the park the first time, as she said, let me tell you what's going on. You know, she said there was a collective, da-da-da-da. She had it. She said, this is what happened, da-da-da-da. And I said, okay. And the first thing I said to myself was, take all the stories out. So they were just stories. So just take the projection out, you know, own my projection, recognize the innocence in anyone else's projection. And it didn't make me feel good instantly, but it took that shit off the plate. You know what I mean? It took all that off the plate, and then it opened up the psyche to this molestation thing, but really the energy of it, which was my innocence, you know, walking into a situation, we all can relate, my total innocence, the innocence of a child being dropped off by, and I'm not saying this is all literal, I'm just saying the energy of it being dropped off by the mother who had knowledge of the perpetrator, who was a masculine, and dealing with that stolen innocence, dealing with that pain, dealing with that suffering. And eventually, you know, she said to me, take the child, you know, in your arms, so to speak, and let him know you will not abandon him again. You will not betray him again. And, you know, there's some deep, man. It was deep, which tells me that we must be getting into, you know, however you want to put it, the deep waters. And I mean that in a good way. The deep waters of this collective transition that we're going through, because I know I wasn't the only one. And I talked to enough men yesterday in passing and comments. And, you know, I use the word brutal, but I mean brutal with the deepest respect, the brutal honesty of the soul. And I'll tell you one other thing, too. It was the first day in my life ever. I was walking and I said to myself, my soul hurts. My soul hurts. Not my heart, my soul. I was like bruised. And I can only think it was, use the word earlier, you said your earliest imprint or when we were imprinted. That's what it felt like. It felt like that's when I got, you know, indoctrinated into the matrix or the mind games or the mind fucks or whatever you want to call it. You know, that's what that memory felt like. And it hurt the soul. It really did. So I don't know.
Yeah, that's intense. I've been shifting crazily, and what I wanted to respond to as far as you and Dr. Joe's talk about, and a lot of what seems to be coming online is about, you know, this trinity, you know, about the child aspect and how it breaks down archetypally is the polarity of the Christ, right, is Lucifer as an archetype.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know if I went into this before, but as far as feminine, masculine, the divine parents, we can think about Lucifer as the child playing a trick on the parents. And so the way I wrote it was that the child, just like in a sexual or a sexual relationship or situation, the Lucifer is the mind. And so if a child comes online or comes in the room or barges in or anything, like it's fucking shit, right? Like it's completely ends the game. And so archetypally speaking, in divine union, when there's a thought that pulls you out of this pure essence of what you're experiencing, that is the distorted masculine.
Mm-hmm.
Where my book really transcribes how the infusion of energy into the field of psychology is really, we are the mind, which is can't figure this shit out, right? Like our thoughts are non-local, mind is not local, but the
Mm-hmm.
3D or 4D is responding to the energetics and the emotions of these imprints. Like it has to try and figure it out, which creates a psychology that needs to manipulate the field in order to compartmentalize it. And so, and the emotions are actually like the true emotions are pushed into the shadow, and there's a quantum physics explanation for this. The true emotions are pushed into the shadow, and we're imprinting the dynamic of the other into infusing with the code, the energetic distortion
Yeah.
stored into our psyche.
Yeah.
And so the computation then becomes, well, I have to figure this out, or, you know, and the feelings go into the shadow. And it's just a response to this epigenetic
Yeah.
environment that, as we're journeying into new frequencies, we can see that this doesn't actually belong to our species. Like
Yeah.
none of it actually is part of our DNA structure
Yeah.
at all. And so then what is it? Like where, like
It's like a virus or something, like a
Thank you. And so we need to see the difference between ego and Watiko.
What is that?
Watiko, thank you for asking.
I will ask the questions if I don't understand. But what is that? Sounds like a cool word.
Watiko is the virus that each of the Aboriginal or Native humans on the planet could see from the Eurocentric individuals that came to take over their land. The Watiko is
collective
by different names by, like, say, the people in Australia, America, as not human.
Yeah. So it's like it. So the Watiko was like what they recognized in these infiltrators, invaders, whatever, as a people that was altered or impure, or it was a collective thing, though. It wasn't like an individual thing. It was a collective thing. That's fascinating. I've never heard of that.
That's the egocentric distortion of masculinity. And so, but that egocentric is egophrenia. It's ego times 10,000.
Yeah.
And it's not digestible by human DNA or our systems because it's so fucking distorted.
Yeah.
And so it's a psychological imprint that you can see. Actually, I watched it be dissolved from my field, and I could see what it is after, like, really soon after I, like, fully awakened. I watched a video by Muji, and he said that sometimes you wake up and you have to go back to sleep. And I was fucking pissed. I was like, no, I died, and I, like, made this big deal out of nothing.
Yeah.
So, but that is the energy of Watiko. That's the distortion in the field that overreacts to nothing.
Yeah.
So everything is disastrous. Something is always occurring that needs an imminent response to.
Yeah.
And so watching myself, and that's usually how I process, actually, is like, and that's why I say, like, this isn't like an experiment. Like, you have to allow your archetypes to play out so that you can see it, right? Otherwise, you just are trying to be at 0 point, and you're not actually going to redigest it without examining it. And so I watched it, became aware of it. And so once you put your 5D consciousness upon it, it can no longer exist, because 5D is like the equal sign. Or as a quantum field, there's no polarity, right?
Yeah.
It's just love. It's just heart. Right. It's just pure. So anything that comes into contact with, or any end of the polarity, the spectrum that comes into contact with the equal sign or the field, the field as it lies, can no longer exist. And that's what we're doing, is placing our awareness on all these fucking layers as they're redigested. But it becomes easy by just placing our awareness on it. And I say easy as I roll my eyes because
I relate to that. I can relate to that because yesterday I already told you I'd never been through anything like it. But if I look back at it, well, like she explained to me later, I was like, man, that was a mother, that was just like, and I kept saying, well, when am I going to feel okay? Because I was okay here. It's just like I was shattered, like my body was affected the most. But anyway, but at the same time, what she was saying was, you've been conscious of it the whole time. You consciously process this thing. Another thing she had me do, she had me keep moving my body, like go into the ocean, so that there was something about that was helping me embody the whole experience as I understand it. I love this comment by Neil Devaney, who has a lot of great comments on the shows. He says, Watiko, mind virus, dream virus. So we dream it away with unconditional love and non-consent. And then Dr. Joe made the comment, uncontrollable impulsiveness. You're telling me that story, and I'm thinking of just the whole concept of manifest destiny. That was Watiko. Even imperialism, that is Watiko, like going in and bombing the shit out of people and, whatever. I mean, that's what these natives and aboriginals and indigenous were dealing with. Well, they were in their innocence, basically. And then this collective thing came in, this virus came in and just...
That couldn't see innocence in humanity at all.
Yeah.
It didn't see... It can't see itself as innocent.
Yeah.
And it can't see others as innocent. Which
kind of like spawned the approach of do unto others before they do unto you, kind of thing. Kind of like...
It's also looking at the mythology of it, though, because I opened into that. You brought it up, actually, or you brought something up, and it's interesting, the mythology of that entering into this kingdom, the United Kingdom. It came from the Eurocentric, egocentric that took over all the fucking textbooks and wrote the history of the world, right? And like, this is just reality. And it's like from your fucking bullshit perspective. And so it's interesting, the mythology of Lucifer written into the strands of our DNA now, but that's what we're evolving out of.
Yeah, that's what we're correcting. Yeah.
But that's what we need to understand, though, too, that there's layers of these dogmatic principles. Not only that, there's layers of mind that don't belong there, because consciousness comes in and takes the place of any of that bullshit. But also, what the fuck was I saying? So, yeah, Lucifer as Watiko, written into or encoded into the mythology of the earth, is just a really interesting dialogue that I would like to have. But it's just it's beyond because like, why would that ever choose to be? And
I mean, to me, I mean, we could go into fourth dimensional influence, all the stuff, whatever. But the key is, because even if you go beyond that, you go back to the split of the feminine and the masculine. And that ultimately is the greatest polarity, whatever you want to call it, where the healing needs. I look at what's going on with me, and very, very alpha male, masculine. I was always sensitive to the feminine. And then the shit hits the fan 7 or 8 years ago, and I hit the streets. But I know it was the feminine energy that got me through it. It was the masculine who would go out at night, get drunk and get in a fight and, make a fool of himself and wake up the next morning into her loving arms. But that was my loving arms. That was my feminine. So as I've gone through this whole thing, and I want to say evolved, but it was more like unraveled, it totally unraveled, which was that it wasn't so much the feminine in me that was a challenge to accept, because no matter if I was conscious or unconscious, that was the strength, that was the power, that was the nurturing, that was the real wisdom of when it was like really bad and like, hey, this is okay, it's not even real, stuff like that.
Archetypal.
But but it was the masculine that I really had the issue with. It was the masculine that I didn't hold reverence. And even if I look at myself now or look at my relationship, it's been a climb. Like the feminine has been here. I'm like going, holy shit. I'm blessed, you know. And then I convert that to, well, wait a minute, if that's your feminine, who are you? You know, this ain't just like, you know, right? And so then I'm like, okay, then I start looking at myself going, whoa, you know, and I don't even know who that is, to be honest with you. I'm finding out. And I think that again is a collective occurrence. We're finding out. We've known. We may not have respected, we may have suppressed and oppressed the feminine energy, but we've known. And what happens? Every family, who's the rock? The grandmother. You know, the indigenous, it's the grandmother council and all that stuff. But we really don't know what this masculine energy power is because it's been so distorted. But I guess we're going to find out soon. I just hope I don't have to throw up anymore.
So archetypally speaking, what's coming out is really this union divide that you're talking about, because for you, it's your protector, but for all of us, it's our protector. Okay. And so our protector for you or for men or for our masculinity looks like the anima. And so for women, it's the animus.
Yeah.
Which are, you understand those terms?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if everybody does, so you might want to explain them real quick.
So in Jungian psychology, the soul is reversed unconsciously. So then in women, we unconsciously are dealing with our masculine. That's our unconscious part of our soul that we get to kind of dive into and remember and integrate. But it comes on as a protector, because I want to use that term because the language of animus and anima, possession, is more harsh than the role of these archetypes as your protector within your subconscious. So that is what's coming on full blast for us as far as this protecting agent, which is this intensity covering over this inferiority and our woundedness and our inavailability, our unable to be vulnerable, our inability to feel into and be vulnerable in relationships to people.
Yeah.
And so what's happening is that as we are coming into full possession of our new template or the new matrix, and I want to say this lightly, but I can't. And so the possession or the energy of a poltergeist or a demonic possession has to come out of your DNA and your psychic valves in order for you to fully possess and be an exalted king and member of yourself, right, in your own kingdom. Yeah. So we're really exalting the male. And so similarly, specific imprints for me have come out of this chasm between my masculine and feminine polarity. But for you, the energy of that demonic possession that a person would have to be involved with in order to, traumatize a child, or even
or themselves,
is evil itself, right?
Yeah. Or themselves. Because I did a lot of that.
What did you say?
I said, you said the demonic possession that occurs when a tormentor or somebody molest a child or whatever. But I said, or you do it to yourself, like self-mutilation, torture and stuff. So I love this comment too, Renata from Greece. She's really connected. And I love the way everybody speaks a different language, but it's the same language all coming together. So if I look at this metaphorically or literally, it's all saying the same thing to me. She says the infection started, talking about the virus, started in the 7th, 6th, 5th, and then continued dimensionally. The human souls are called to forgive the fallen angels. This is the only way of healing. So even if we look at that in a non-literal, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with the literal, because I don't have these answers, but if we look at it in a metaphoric way, an energetic way, that's truly what we're talking about. Whatever interference or alteration or modification or interruption that was made, it's in our DNA, like you're saying. So we have to, we're not healing anything outside of ourselves. We're actually healing something inside of ourselves, which means we've got to own the fact that it's within us. And that's where you get back to what you've been talking about earlier, where, you know, these people coming to you saying, hey, so-and-so did this and so-and-so did that, and it's not my fault. Well, it is, and that's a hard pill to swallow, you know, but that's something I've seen people do more and more on a collective scale in the 6 or 7 years I've been online. More and more people are accepting that, hey, it doesn't make sense, but I carry the murderer gene, or I carry the rapist gene, or whatever you want to, however you want to put it. More and more people are coming to terms with that. Real interesting thing happened yesterday after all that. Morgan had an old phone out and she was looking at some old pictures, right? So then she got done with it and she had downloaded this app, which was a pick a card app, like reading. And I'm like, yeah, I don't normally espouse to any of this stuff, but I'm learning that there is no coincidences, nothing is a mistake. And, you know, it's all energy, right? So she goes, I picked 3 cards, right? So it was past, present, future. But again, it wasn't about Todd, the way I saw this thing go down. Now, the first one was the past, which was basically, I don't remember exactly what the card said, but it took me back to the spirit walk when I woke up. Like I was in from the human eyes, fucked, you know? But from my eyes, I was like, holy shit, that, you know, I mean, my third eye open, everything's been explained to me, and I can see where I'm going, like this phenomenal cosmic trajectory, right? But I was shadowed and I didn't know anything else. I just knew that. And then the second one was the present, which was shadow, all shadow work. I'm like, oh shit, man, come on. But if you read the back of it, it talked about what we talk about, which is what you talk about, which is the only way to get through to a higher elevation is to go through the shadow, you know. And then, but the third one was a picture of this lion man, which had actually appeared to me like 2 days before. This king, use the word king. And I even told Morgan, I said, it's not like king, like I'm a man king. It's some other kind of king thing. And it said power. And it just made, and she started laughing. She goes, oh, there you go. But to me, that kind of made a lot of sense to me in terms of that part of the masculine that we're all finding out what it's about, you know. And again, the importance of the shadow, you know, the importance of the shadow. It's just, we're not going to get around it, so we might as well face it and run through it.
It's interesting though, you know, that each part that's reintegrated, right, or everything that's taken responsibility for or consciously suffered and integrated back into, right, is like this really deep and dark density that, like, early on in my journey, like, it was so dark and I was like, well, just clear it, like, because I could very easily clear my energy. And it was like, no, this so many layers of conscious suffering back into the integration of where I lost my power. And so once you're gaining this, you have to understand that there is a time period of really dark surrendering.
Yeah. I agree with that. And if, you know, look at all these shows, the stories, there seems to always be this parallel. Everybody went deep, and they went deep for a long time, you know. And even then, there were layers. Even after I met Morgan, there was many, many layers for me, because you just don't know. You don't know until you know. And again, somebody even of that carries that kind of wisdom can sit there and tell you. And many times she's told me, you know, I told you this like 2 years ago. And I'm like, yeah, but I couldn't. I had no idea. You know, it's just, and I think that's another thing with the masculine, is that he carries wisdom, you know, but he's been you know, he wasn't as connected to the higher realms or whatever you want to call it, intuition. And it's like for everything that he accomplished in his life, no matter how successful it was in business or whatever the case was, all that's gone, man. It's all like, it doesn't apply. There's no, it brings no skin in the game whatsoever. You got no skin in the game because you got no skin on your ass left. You've been stripped, filleted, you know, laid out. But there's this thing happening. And we talked about it 2 or 3 weeks ago. And I was telling you, I'm feeling this thing, right? Like this power, but it's coming like one spoonful at a time. Like even yesterday, they took me right to the edge. That's as far as I could go. And then today's a new day. And these cycles, I don't think these cycles are going to end. I don't, you know, I don't. I think that if every one of us were what we are and we're calling the shots as we are, we would all say, enough of this bullshit. Let's put the pedal to the metal, go as fast as we can, but still honoring ourselves, you know, and our brothers and sisters, because, man, whatever's on the other side of this big collective shadow, whatever this distortion is, has got to be something this universe has never seen.
And
It's
that's
got
why
to
I
be.
think it's really interesting the people who bring in that we're choosing all this. And I don't agree with that. Like I just don't. We're not in control. Like we're in control to the degree that we are being guided as fuck.
Yeah. Yeah.
We are not in control of this. And so astrology then becomes the mainframe of the scientific simulation that we live in. And that's how we understand how the field is operating, what we're coming into, and like really allows us to coordinate, right, our own coordinates up along with this technology that we live in. And
Yeah.
so understanding that Mario is who we are. We're just a 2D avatar. Our higher self has the game controller. We're like, when you push fucking A, you jump.
Yeah.
And that's how this is working. And so you're not in control. You're not the one holding the joystick. You didn't choose this. The universe is intending this through you, and you're being lived, you're being breathed, and it has nothing to do with you. And the more you can lose yourself, right, the more you can come into this equation fully empowered with your experience and your intuition and the energy movements that come into your field as your guidance system. And like not understanding through mind where you're going at all. You know.
Yeah,
At
and
least that's what it's been for me. Just a huge surrender.
Well, and like last night, so she starts channeling at 2 a.m. I started getting stuff about an hour later. I'm watching it all in my room with
Night.
my eyes open. The cosmos is there. I'm seeing Lyrians, Andromedans, Arcturans, and some blue avian or Pleiadian, I don't really know. So I go outside. Now we go outside and it's about 4 o'clock, 4:30 in the morning. And I look straight up and I see this star and it's Lyra. Then I look over here and it's Andromeda. Then over here and it's and they're all like pointed right at, you know what I mean? Jupiter has been huge. And I thought, okay, well, there you go. Like I knew that somehow the alignment of all that brought the opportunity for my soul coordinates, both physically and non-physically, to connect. I don't know. I can't explain it. It's a language I don't know how to translate, but it all aligned for me in my universe, and that's all that matters to me. It was validation and confirmation. Just keep going. Not to mention all the roosters on the island started crowing about 3, and they didn't stop till about 8. That was pretty funny.
Yeah,
So yeah.
my daughter was turning and making noises all night. Like something was thinking in my field, and like it was a very weird like extraction experience of, and then like something thinking in my field. Like my mind really doesn't do this chatter shit, and
Uh-huh.
so like something was thinking in my
Wow.
field, and so it was just like a thought stream, and I don't have, I could tell when it's not mine, and so
Did it feel like it was a higher self type of vibration, or did
no,
it feel like more like a stranger or something you hadn't come across? I'm just curious.
it was a guy,
Yeah.
and I don't know what it was. It was
Mm.
new to me, but I know that what was extracted was my past masculine
Mm.
composition, like something shifted, and then I could feel it this morning. Like
Maybe
there,
it was the louder, or maybe it was the more enhanced voice of your true masculine.
yeah, maybe, yeah, a more reasonable judge,
Yeah.
a more reasonable masculine, which is the logos,
Yeah.
which had actually to subside, right? Like something subsided in order for me to subsist or just basically exist. And
Yeah.
so, really cool to.
So yeah.
I'm interested in talking about if this is ever going to end. Like, and
I
even
don't.
just thinking about like how long this has been going on for, and like, so how, I mean, I love it. Like, I love analyzing it, right? It's
Yeah.
just my everything. And I don't think that I would ever stop. Astrology is not going to stop. But this is so long. There's so many layers. It's been
Yeah.
going on forever.
Yeah.
And it, how much longer? How many layers of this shit can there possibly be, you know?
Yeah. I don't know, man, but it'll keep us busy. That's for sure. And
We'll give it,
on that note, I just want to tell everybody that we're trying to expand. We've been trying to. A lot of people know that. So if these shows resonate with you, please consider gifting forward and support contribution. Um, thank you, all of you that have, and not just us, but also the people that we have on, such as Allison, because this is the year of expansion, sovereignty, co-creation, collaboration, and we are doing our part to introduce 5D commerce, which is an equal energy exchange. So do not underestimate the power of one unique and equal soul, or identify yourself with an amount on a gift. It's all pure energy, and I just want to say that today because I moved to say it, and also for those of you who haven't aren't as familiar with Allison, if you want to tell us again where we can find you, and just quickly whatever you do or whatever you want to say.
okay, so I am on Facebook. For now, I just bought my domain name, so I'm working on my website, which is the quantum field of astrology. So really infusing the field of psychology, the quantum field of psychology. So infusing the field of psychology with the energy dynamics. Like I said, in response to psychology is in response to the imprints that we are trying to figure out, you know, from other people. We are responding to our experience, and then how that actually gets stored is what I go into in my book that I'm working on as well. And so I facilitate a space and the unraveling of your psychic tones that are still somewhat distorted. We feel through that. I've developed a counseling system that allows you to heal pretty quickly specific archetypal woundings, and then shift into a higher plane and an easier, sometimes processing the psychic valves where matter and spirit converge in the psyche, and that's really creating, you know, what you're experiencing perceptually that really has nothing to do with anyone else. And so this is really the work of vibrating higher. There's
Yeah.
no, you can't think yourself into a higher vibration. You can't convince yourself that you're already there without your shit getting triggered out. It's just not possible. Let's get to work, people.
Yeah, no more self-help books. We're shadow workers. I love that one. Shadow workers. Thank you, Allison. Thank you. It's a great pleasure always having a conversation with you and getting our WTF updates. So you take care. Best to you and the family. I'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you for everything. All right. See y'all. Back in 45 minutes with Keith Gregory.